This episode is part of a special bonus series presented by Jotform. Jotform Enterprise provides an all-in-one solution to streamline administrative tasks, enhance community engagement, and foster innovation. Using their no-code drag-and-drop forms and workflows, your teams can securely collect and store data, automate routine tasks, and collaborate on team resources. Educational institutions are also eligible for a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. jotform.com/enterprise/education. And a quick note, this episode is part of a special bonus series. You can find the video version exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. This week's episode is titled Crafting the Perfect Student Interest Survey, and I'm excited to share the what, why, and how of creating interest surveys for students of all ages in any subject area. It's just me today, so let's dive in. Today, we are going to talk about student surveys, and this is a solo episode of the podcast, the first in a series where we'll dive into different essential topics related to technology. So student surveys are something that have come up in lots of my conversations with educators who want to figure out what their students already know about a topic that usually falls more in the formative assessment category, as well as educators who want to know what kids are interested and excited about. So student interest surveys are an important part of engaging students in the learning process. If we're able to make connections to topics that they are naturally curious about, or that might connect to something that they've explored before and enjoyed, we are able to really boost that student engagement. So when we think about connecting content to what kids are interested and excited about, a student survey is just a starting point. You might build out a form with questions. We'll talk more about that in this episode. You might review that data on your own or collaboratively with a team. But the goal with this episode today is to unpack exactly how to craft a student interest survey so you can get some information that is actionable, that you can take back to the work that you do with students. So let's start first with the big question. What is a student interest survey? So an interest survey is a tool used to gather information about students' preferences, their hobbies, the way they like to learn or engage with content, and some of their goals for inside the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. So the purpose is really to see what motivates kids. Can we connect with them on a more personal level? And can we tailor lessons and activities so it connects back to the things that they already find important before they walk through the doors of a classroom? So in an elementary classroom, you might ask kids about what books they've loved to read in the past, and that can help you pick out great stories or great informational text to share with them. You might ask about their favorite hobbies or after-school activities so that when you are giving examples or creating math word problems in an elementary environment, you are consciously connecting their interests to what it is that you are teaching, even if on the surface it's doesn't really feel like it relates or connects. Now, in a middle school classroom, you might ask students to share some topics they'd like to explore, even within the content of your curriculum. So you could do some of the same things like those elementary examples with hobbies or after school activities or favorite books or movies. But you might then extend the questions as you move into middle school to connect directly to the content. You might ask kids which subtopics they're most interested or excited about, what piques their interest. You might find that as you start to ask those types of content specific questions, when students might be tempted to say, I don't know what I want to learn more about related to the American Revolution, that you instead of giving open ended questions like, tell me about your favorite hobbies, you give questions with some choices for subtopics that you might explore a little bit more deeply. In a high school classroom or as you're moving up the grades, you might ask students questions about their interests, like their hobbies or after school activities or favorite books or movies. But you might also ask them about their career interests, what they would like to do after leaving an academic setting. This can help you pick and choose some real world examples that connect back to what kids are aspiring to or curious about when it comes to how they interact, not just with content, but with the larger world. At the high school level, and you might at the elementary and middle school level too, you might also ask students how they like to learn or how they like to engage with content. For example, by the time a student enters high school, they might have a better understanding on how they like to learn, maybe in short videos at their own pace. Maybe they love listening to podcasts. So, audio is a way that they might want to learn. So, you can formulate questions with your interest survey that keep both your grade level bands, your content, and your goals for how you're going to use that information in mind. Now, why are student interest surveys important? Well, I've given a couple reasons why or how you might use them. But if you want to strengthen your classroom culture, and build strong relationships with your students, showing that you care about their interests, what's important to them, what they like to do, what they would choose to do with their time, can help you create a more inclusive and more supportive and generally more welcoming environment. So, building those relationships, building that trust in a classroom can start with an interest survey where you are expressing your interest in what they are interested about. And you are purposefully, right, intentionally using that information to inform your future instruction, even if it's something as simple as making a quick connection or sharing a quick anecdote or something, a little story that connects back to their interest and what it is that you are teaching. Another reason why a student interest survey is important is because it can help enhance or boost engagement in the course content or the subject area that you're teaching, that particular unit of study that you're working on. So you can incorporate student interest into lessons or projects for that purpose of getting kids to care more about a particular thing that you are learning or that they're learning or that you're teaching and sharing with them. For example, a student who has told you, who's filled out an interest survey and told you that they are, a fan of basketball, right? They might engage a little bit more with a math problem that involves game statistics or a science lab that connects back to something in the gym. Or if a student has told you that they love sharks or dolphins or another underwater creature, you might decide that when you are teaching a lesson, you connect back to that habitat, or you choose an informational text that is related to a topic students are interested in, like sharks or dolphins or underwater creatures, even if the purpose of your lesson isn't anything about an animal, but instead made idea or detail or something that connects back to an ELA goal that you have, an English language arts goal, but also connects to a student's interest. You might also find that you want to use a student interest survey to support your differentiation goals or to help with differentiating instruction. One way that we differentiate content can include adapting your teaching strategies based on what a student has expressed interest in or what their preference or choice might be. There are different ways to think about differentiating instruction, and differentiating based on interest, might be one area that you want to explore, or differentiating based on what a student has told you in a survey, like they prefer to learn in a certain way. That can all be things that you take into consideration. A quick note from the presenter of today's episode, Jotform. Jotform Enterprise lets you build a form in minutes. Student survey forms, homework submission forms, online quizzes, and so much more. You can start from scratch, or if you want to get a head start, check out their collection of free form templates designed with teachers, schools, and districts in mind. Learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. Jotform.com/enterprise/education. So, imagine that you know already, because you've given a survey, that a student prefers hands-on activities and working in pairs. They don't like to work independently. Well, then you can use that information you've gathered during an interest survey to make sure they're in the right group or in the right activity that they're working on. Where a student who has shared that they prefer to work independently, you might give them a different task or the choice between the two so they can decide what they want to do on that particular day. So this information can help in lots of ways. It might even inform how you seat or arrange students in a group, knowing that a certain group has very similar interests and is going to jump into conversation a little bit more quickly, right? Or even assigning roles in a project if students have told you that they really like to do one thing or another when they work in a group. So now that we've thought about the what a student interest survey is, and why you might want to include that in the work that you do, let's think about what to actually include in a student interest survey. So starting off at the top is general info, like a student's name and maybe some quick favorite things, like a favorite subject area or favorite subtopic within that subject area. Although it may be tempting to do more anonymous, and there's use cases for that, right? To gather some general information about a group. When you are doing a survey for an individual, right, knowing exactly who responded to what, you can use that information at a more granular level to support those individual students. You might then ask, after that general information, about their personal interests, like what are their favorite hobbies? What's a book or a movie that they've loved? What kind of extracurricular activities do they participate in? So for personal interests, you might leave these as open-ended questions. Students can fill in their response, right, to these open-ended questions. As you get to something where a student might struggle to tell you, like what it is that they like about a particular topic, then you might switch to, say, a multiple choice or choose a few, right, of the answers here. But keeping things open-ended when it comes to personal interests might be the way you choose to formulate those questions. Then you can ask students about the way they like to learn. I alluded to it before with taking action, right, on these interest surveys. But you might ask students, do you prefer to work in a group or on your own? Do you have a preference for types of classroom activities? Like when it comes to projects, do you love to create movies? Do you love to draw? Or do you prefer to write out something in a few paragraphs? Now, when you're talking to students, these questions that you ask will definitely vary depending on the group. For example, An elementary student might not be able to answer an open ended question like, how do you like to learn? But you might say something like, do you like working with lots of friends or on your own? So you'll want to make decisions on how you approach a group, right, with these questions. Some of them you might put in a digital form for students to fill out. Other questions you might ask one on one when meeting with students, particularly if they are at a level where they might struggle to fill out information in a digital space. So, in addition to those learning preferences, you might also ask students about their goals and aspirations. This could be anything from future, far off career interests, or it might be a little more short term, like something they want to accomplish at the end of the year. So, for example, if you're working with students and a few of them are on sports teams with the school and they say that they want to win state championship for their sport, or they want to earn some record or whatever it might be, then you might decide to use those kind of examples, that kind of language when talking to a group about accomplishing a task, just to make that connection and let them know that they've been seen and heard in sharing their short term goals. And then you might also include some classroom specific questions like, what's your favorite part of the school day or the school week? Or if you could learn about anything, what would it be? Or what skills do you hope to gain this year? So you could ask a big, broad question like that. Or you might find that those first couple categories I shared are going to give you just enough or plenty of information for you to work with as you are getting ready to design a new unit or modify some lessons. You might even ask a big open ended question like, what's something you wish I knew about you or your teacher knew about you, however you wanted to frame it. So these are some general questions you could include in an interest survey. If you are creating an interest survey, designing a specific unit, say, for example, you are about to kick off a unit on endangered species with a group of students. You might ask them specific questions like, what part of the world would you like to visit? And when they respond, then you can maybe make some decisions on what examples of habitats or what specific endangered species you even want to mention in your examples. So those are some general questions, the ones I started off with, but you can get pretty specific as you are building out your student interest survey. Now, let's talk about some sample questions for different grade levels. If you are working with students in an elementary level, you might ask them some questions that connect to their day to day. Like, what's your favorite game to play at recess? Or what's one thing you're really good at? Now, at this level, you might have students enter in their information into a form, maybe a digital space where they are going to submit their responses. Or you might have them draw a picture, right, in response to one of these questions. It might be overwhelming to give your first graders 5 or 6 questions on a student interest survey. You might have one big prompt that helps you get to know that student, right? And you're using it as a way to gauge their interest and then help design some future lessons. In a middle school classroom, you might start to get more specific, asking about certain topics they want to learn about, or if they had a free day at school, what's the first thing they would do? That might help you learn whether there's a special computer game they really enjoy playing at school, or there's a part of the building they've always wanted to visit, like they don't get to the library enough. So you can learn a lot with that type of question too. Then, at a high school level, you might ask something like, what are your top 3 career interests? Or if you could have any job for a day, what would it be? Or if you could be a principal of the school or president for a day, what's the first thing you would do? Of course, a question like that would give you a great response, right, from an elementary school student too. But at a high school level, the decisions they make, the way they respond to a question like that might give you something that feels a little bit more actionable with your group. So As you're designing your student interest survey, you want to have a sense of how you're going to get it in front of your group. As I mentioned earlier, with the elementary students or early elementary students who might struggle to interact in a digital space, you might give them a prompt and have them draw their response. But if you're working with students who are interacting with digital devices, you might give them a form that makes it easy to collect and analyze data. So something that's going to help make the whole process more efficient. More efficient for you, of course, to review any information that has come through, but also easier for them to give you that information in the first place. A digital space like a form would give students a more accessible way to respond to questions that you gave, particularly if they're using a tool that might use a screen reader or they might need to zoom in to something. And it also allows them to complete a survey at their own time, right, on their personal device, their school issued device. That's the one that they use. Now, as you are thinking about how to put a survey into action, digital tools can also help you stay organized. Responses are going to save automatically. They're sorted for you so that you have them in just the right place. So lots of options there as you are building out surveys and reviewing some digital tools that can really help you make that happen. So if you're ready to get started and you're looking for some tips to really make surveys actionable, here are a couple things to consider. First, keep it short. Just a half dozen questions to avoid overwhelming students. Be clear and specific. So use simple language for your younger students, provide examples for older students, right? Those open-ended questions versus the ones that are multiple choice, right? Or drop down. You might even include a Likert scale where students say on 1 to 5, right? How they feel about something or how interested they are in a topic. You'll want to review the data. So have a spreadsheet or visual chart that gives you some trends of the group as well as individual info. And you want to follow up. Just like formative assessment data, there's no point in collecting data we're not going to use. And we also want students to know that they're not just filling something out that's going to go into a pile, right? But they're completing a form that you are going to review. So as we think about putting these ideas into action today, student interest surveys are a great way to foster engagement and build relationships and help you make sure that your content is tailored and ready and high interest for your group of students. Let's finish up today's episode with a few key points to make this EdTech easy. Start small with just a few questions. Combine open-ended and multiple choice responses. Let students know you are going to use the information from the survey. Make connections throughout the school year to student interests. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from this episode by heading to classtechtips.com/podcast. A big thank you to Jotform, the presenter of today's episode, and this special series. If you want to watch the video version of this episode, you can find it exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. Just head to YouTube and type Jotform in the search bar. To learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise, head to jotform.com/enterprise/education.